Tyler, this is going to sound crazy, but today our guest is Tyler from Modern Craftsman.
You know what?
And it's not
That
you.
does sound crazy.
And it's not you.
That does sound crazy. I usually, whenever we have a guest on whose name is Tyler, I'm like, that's such a lame name. But then he was like, what's your name? And I was like, Tyler. He's like, cool name.
And,
all right.
and so he is at Modern Craftsman and moderncraftsman.com online. So he was apparently the OG, because we would have definitely grabbed it if that wasn't the case. But what a talented really artist and focuses in concrete, architectural concrete and architectural metalwork. And at the very end of the podcast, he kind of has this moment of silence and communicates that this conversation that we have today is so timely, and kind of drops a bomb at the very end about someone that's working for him. But just a genuine conversation about really sticking to your guns and sticking to what you believe in terms of what you're trying to accomplish in this world, and not getting so caught up in the competitive nature of always trying to be better.
Yeah, I enjoyed getting to know Tyler and hearing about his business. I knew from pretty early on that it was going to be somewhat of like the classic lead into the trades through following a passion. And then I think that presents a lot of struggles for us as that like classic romantic tradesman lifestyle where it's like, hey, this may not ever offset the amount of work that we put into it, but it's fulfilling and it's creating a lifestyle for us. And I think that is a part of it, but there's more to it than that. And I think that there's still opportunity to create a better lifestyle within that realm. So it was a good conversation. I enjoyed getting to meet him and learn more about him.
And a little note, Jeff Sweener actually was going to guest host today. Unfortunately, I'm going to take full blame. I never followed up and made sure that his new equipment was tested. So I'm not sure if that will get edited in the beginning or not. I'm sure Doug will figure that out. But if not, Jeff will be on in another episode probably next week, and join us then. Let Andersen guide you into your customer's dream indoor-outdoor living space with their exquisite selection of patio doors. Whether your customers envision seamless transitions or stunning focal points, they have the perfect door to complement any lifestyle.
Need help with selection or just curious about the options? We've got you covered with the new patio door selection guide. From sleek, modern designs to timeless classics, Andersen's expert advice and tips will ensure a simplified decision-making process. Learn more at andersenwindows.com/patio door selection guide.
Are you ready to close jobs in half the time? What about improve your productivity by 50% or even scale your business to 8 figures?
Thousands of builders like you are already doing this, and you can too with Buildertrend. If you've heard of them before, you may assume they're just project management software. Well, think again.
Not only does Buildertrend offer the tools for sales, project, customer, and financial management, but they also do advanced reporting and analytics, material rebates, online payments, cash back on business purchases, monthly conferences, in-person consulting, financing, and insurance.
And the list goes on. So whether you've tried them in the past or you're just hearing about them now, get over to buildertrend.com/MC demo to learn more about how to run and grow your entire business in one place.
And you're in Salt Lake, right?
I'm in Salt Lake. My compliments to you, gentlemen. I've got a few friends that have listened to your podcast, and they have said that they have received a lot of value out of the episodes, if that's what you call them, if it's an episode. But
Yeah,
yeah, they I'd say for years they were
I
really
appreciate that.
expressing gratitude to very pertinent information, knowledge, shared experiences that yeah, those guys were really stoked. So
That,
I think
that's
it's really
badass,
cool to
man.
be here with you guys.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I don't know what it took why it took so long to get you on the podcast, being that your website's Modern Craftsman. But
I I used to get a bunch of before I pawned the Instagram off to somebody else. I'd see a lot of people saying thank you and thank you and thank you, and I was like, it's not to me. You gotta change up the. I think we have the hyphen and you guys don't, or something like that. But yeah, for
I don't
years you
know.
guys had a lot of folks getting the messages to the
Wait, so
wrong.
you don't have the Instagram?
We have
He
it.
doesn't run it.
No, I stay off social media. I That
Oh
stuff drives
yeah.
me bonkers. I Not for me.
Why how come? I'm curious.
I'd say like I get a little bit competitive and like, oh, there's a
Mm,
job that came up and or an idea. I don't know. I found that I just experienced a higher level of anxiety utilizing social media in general, but it was always based around work. And once I found somebody to just handle it for me, I felt so much better, able to
mm,
put my energy into other topics and different focus.
that's fair.
So what do they do? What do you on your? Is your social like help supplement your business, or is it just like, hey, I needed a social page?
It started, I mean, oh man, it's makes me feel old to think about when it started, but yeah, I think early on, I mean, 14 years ago was kind of the essence of, or the beginning of it, and felt that it was good for networking and whatnot. I still feel that it's it's a great tool beyond just having a website, um,
Sure.
which is crazy that websites. Anyway, the yeah, I didn't want anything to do with it after a very short period of time. Like it was just not, computers are not my jam. And then yeah, finding somebody that was willing to invest and put in the time to get things rolling. We got a lot of good jobs early on from Instagram, particularly. Uh, and as things have evolved over the years, like just face to face networking, I think was a little bit more valuable over the long haul. Um, and we actually did get a good job recently, but generally it's not our main flow.
So what is primarily your work composed of now? Like your website's nice,
Thank you.
but like I know briefly looking into what you do and like approaching all of this from more of an artistic perspective. But like, what's your bread and butter?
We do, I would say concrete. So we'll make a concrete panel that's say 5 foot by 10 foot at 3/4 of an inch thick. That could be utilized in a shower wall application to changing the physical texture, color. We have a variety of different finishes, but mostly vertical wall installations. A lot of our fireplaces in particular, concrete and or metal. Metal, same opportunity to change the color variation, visual movement in that product, but typically bread and butter be vertical wall installation. We've
And why concrete and metal?
My father was a concrete guy growing up, and I love the material. It was just a really, yeah. As a kid, I loved. I mean, I still smile thinking about it, but concrete trucks and just the formability. Um, yeah, I love concrete. Metal kind of came into play. Furniture pieces, welding, utilizing steel, not like in a super structural realm, but to offset and augment, um, floating benches, floating sink,
Yeah.
to weld and anchor those into the substrate.
So was your dad more of like traditional concrete contractor?
Yeah, he did. His big thing was parking structures is what he really excelled at.
Okay.
And so, watching he really enjoyed the earthwork, the dirt work, digging,
Yeah.
and he kind of scaled up into, taking more on from the dirt to the concrete. But yeah, he did.
Because like what you do and what your dad do seem like two different worlds, even though you're working with the same type of materials, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I look at, go ahead.
I was just going to say that he wanted me to take over his business, and what I didn't like about what he did was there wasn't a lot of creative opportunity. I thought it'd be pretty
Yeah.
neat if you could, as a design build, have an architectural relation, or have a relationship as an architect and fulfill the structural requirements of the construction process. But it was when he was building his house, I was probably 17, and he poured his own concrete countertops and polished them up to show the terrazzo, the rock inside of it. And I think that was kind of the beginning of what caught my attention with concrete as a material, on a more decorative side of things.
So when you first started your business, how long ago was it?
14 and a half years ago.
And you were doing mostly like furniture type stuff?
Yeah, my son, I found out I was bringing a little boy. Well, I didn't know what sex, but bringing a child into the world. And I kind of decided that I needed to make a decision about what I was going to do. I was remodeling homes for several years, and then the market crashed and I wasn't able to get a stated income loan anymore. And knowing that I was going to have a child, it was go get I want to call it a real job. I don't feel like I have a real job, but I have a real job, if that makes sense, right? Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
It
decided to invest in myself, and took some classes. And like, concrete countertops weren't a real popular thing back in the day, and just to kind of carve out a niche was um, taxing but rewarding.
did you like I see what you did and the path that you took. It's like I don't feel that it's that different from how a lot of people get into trades. It's something that you can bite off relatively easily, but at the same time I think that like you're getting into the trade for the passion and the craft, and a lot of times that doesn't necessarily lend itself to financial stability.
Not at all. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of financial instability with that, isn't there?
Yeah,
Well,
well, it's like, all right, I'm gonna have a kid. I'm gonna get serious about this. I'm gonna start my own business, and then like to look at it from a furniture perspective, where I feel like that's why most people start building furniture once they become retired, because it's just like you're putting so much time into something and never being able to recoup the amount of time that goes into it.
Sure.
Well,
But
it's interesting, like what you said in the beginning too about social media, is that you stepped away from it because you were competitive. And when you said that at first, I was like, yeah, me too. I'm a very competitive person. But I think what hearing you talk about why why you got into concrete and the path you took and the very artistic approach to it is that it wasn't even that you were competitive in the sense of wanting to do do better than someone else. It was that you were becoming competitive with yourself. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you were getting to a point where you were removing the art behind what you were doing, and instead you're faced with this challenge of always competing or always doing something, leveling up. And I think I can say myself included, is that sometimes I get caught up in that, and you end up building a business based on competition, and that competition can be really unhealthy,
yeah,
where you're talking about doing what you love doing, and that's it, like no compromise. And I'm fortunate enough to be working on this project 45 White Oak, and it's very much that. There's no client, there is nothing really holding me back. I have a team of, or I have a support system behind me that says let's build, exactly what you want without compromise, and let's prove that the market wants this. And to do it is such a liberating feeling, where it's like, this is what I've wanted to do my entire life, and to be able to step in and ignore all of the noise. And it's just interesting, because I've always used social media and always have really like supported social media in the sense of how I built my business, and how I've gotten to where I'm, where I'm at today. And I will never discredit that, but there's definitely points in time where it 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 becomes debilitating,
Yeah.
because you feel as though, then you get into this whole comparison,
Yeah.
mindset of, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Look what he's doing.
Yeah.
Are you a Rick Rubin fan?
Rick
Oh,
Rubin, I ignorant. Sorry. Who's Rick Rubin?
that's okay. Rick Rubin is a music producer,
Oh yeah,
and he
yeah.
wrote
The
this
old,
book.
yeah.
So
I do know.
he wrote this book called The Creative Act. Um, and I have not finished it, but I've read bits and pieces of it. But he talks a lot about the audience, and how he doesn't do what he does for the audience, where most people will, where they write music and create art because of the audience and who gets to enjoy it. Instead, he's like, I'm just doing this for me.
Pure
And
intrinsic reward.
Yes. And he talks about how it's the purest form of art. And there's arguments against that, but you know, but that's what he stands for, is that this is I'm just doing what I want to do. So
Sure.
hearing you talk about this is super interesting. And even your tie back to your dad of, him doing concrete, it goes from, you're doing concrete. I don't want to diminish it, but it's like you're an order taker versus a creative, right? Where it's, someone is contracting you to do a
Yeah.
specific thing,
Yeah.
and that is the order, where you're contracted to not do a very specific thing. Your website even, says one of the reasons why concrete is so fascinating is because it's not consistent,
Yeah.
and there's beauty and art in that lack of consistency.
Yeah. The that pursuit of like a fulfillment of yourself, right? Like what you're saying about Rubin, just following his inner heart, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's like you said before. It's not necessarily what's going to make you a whole heap of money, but if it if it rewards you and fulfills you, that's invaluable.
Why do you think it can't make you money?
I'm just saying money's not the motivator. I think it
I understand.
can
Yeah,
make
I understand
money.
it's not the motivator, but I I feel like a lot of people lean on that, where it's like, I can't do that right now because I can't make money at it, or I'm gonna build, like, Tyler, you said, like, I'm gonna build furniture when I retire because I'll never recoup my money. But you know, I guess, what is that limiting factor?
I mean, it's market based, right? Like obviously, but are you asking, you know, within oneself internally, are you limiting yourself with that ideology?
Mm,
Um, not, I mean, I've been able to feed my kid, feed myself. I can buy a bunch of trucks that are I can work on and have a good time with, but it's not the same as like, and this is what you said before about the social media is the relativity comparison. You know,
mm.
what does one want, and how do you define success, fulfillment? Um, that's all relative to oneself. Um, but I would imagine if I cut down the hours that I've invested in my business over the last 14 and a half years, I'm sure you guys are the same. You've had 80-hour work weeks for months on end, and take those phone calls at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night just to keep things rolling. And if you were getting paid hourly with another business, would you be more, would you have more money in your pocket, so to speak?
I mean, that's something I speak with people a lot about, that when you first start your business, it's investing in that. And like there's no way around that initially, right? You have to put the sweat equity into it for many reasons. But at what point does it get to where, like you said, you have a kid and you're trying to raise your kid and you're trying to support a lifestyle and everything else, where it's like, I'm getting to do what I want to do, but I'm also just giving away so much of my time for free.
Mm.
And that's like, I think the biggest struggle, where you look at it, and again, it depends on what you're in it for. But when you look at the numbers at the end of the year and you're like, okay, yeah, I made a comfortable living. But then you're looking at that from like the, 40 hours a week mindset, 2,000 hours or whatever it is, where you're like, I probably put in 4,000 hours. Like, let's be honest. And then you look at it and you're like, I'm making less than I would have if I just went to work at Home Depot.
Sure, totally.
So I think that like the balance there is what it requires of you, and again, that fulfillment. If you're completely fulfilled with that, it's no issue. Like if that's what gets you up every day and makes you the best version of yourself. But like for me, my business put too much stress. Like I really enjoy what I'm doing, but the amount of stress and why I was working those hours were more so for my customers. And I was like, that's when it doesn't make sense. We're
Mhm.
like, yeah, I'm fulfilled, but I'm also putting in 80 hours a week to scrape by. And it's not necessarily for me or serving me entirely. It's more so to serve my customers. And I think that's where there's an issue, and it makes it really hard to sustain that long term.
Yeah. Do you gentlemen, with your business, do you prioritize like self-care?
I have in the past couple of years. So like for background, I'm more of an owner operator, more hands on, doing the work myself, doing smaller projects. I got into it for the craft, and like that's what I enjoy. But over the past couple of years, like for many years, I just worked too much. I wound up in the hospital twice just from physically like working too much. And a lot of it was, as life progresses and your family grows and things become more expensive, it was like, I need to make more money. How do I make more money? Not understanding how to do that. But then at that point, a couple of years ago, I did start prioritizing self care and what I need to do for myself, and not dropping everything for my customers, and prioritizing what was important to me outside of just the actual job and the work. But I still wanted to be able to do that and get that fulfillment out of it. So I kind of switched my company up in the way that I'm doing things, and I'm doing less work now and just finding customers that are looking at what I do as less of a commodity, and more of like an art based thing,
Sure.
where it's like you kind of can't go elsewhere if you want this.
Yeah.
Um, and that's been really good for me, because I still get to do what I want to do, but I'm also not working for nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would second that. I think I've definitely prioritized self care and specifically my health and like nutrition. But last week, actually was the first week in over a year that I skipped going waking up and going to the gym because I was so overwhelmed with things that I needed to get done for work. And I remember getting to Friday and asking myself, I said, was that worth it? You know, did I actually accomplish, going rather than going to the gym in the morning, did I actually accomplish more work, or did I get the things done that I needed that would I have otherwise not been able to? And the answer was no.
Mm.
And it's like I went into it knowing that, um, and I think but it was a good reminder. I think it was a good reminder that I had been so consistent with it that I was like, you know what, I'm going to just take the 1 week and play catch up and get in the office early and, get the things I need done, only to realize that no, that wasn't what my issue was. My issue was that I just, I wasn't focused when I was at work. I just,
Sure.
I got to keep the consistency when it comes to my health. But, you know, I think that generally speaking, things like social media definitely attribute to it, is that there's so much pressure, in our professional careers And in the industry that you were in before, remodeling homes, there's the client side of it, and there's just an enormous amount of pressure from all sides, and then trying to be the best version of yourself, and being a dad and being a husband, and also delivering for your client, but also being a good craftsman, and doing things the right way, and using products that aren't harmful, and being on the leading, like all of these things, just you know are, again, debilitating. And I think that, Tyler, I remember the day that you texted me that you were in the hospital. And and it was that's scary, right? Like, the
Yeah.
fact that, like, our human body has that reaction to, like, hey, I'm going to shut down because this is too much. When it's very hard, I think, to get to a place mentally to know when that point is. And and even when we do, I think oftentimes we ignore it, where it's like, no, I can still go. And then you're in a position where it's like, no, we're going to shut down for a minute.
You physically just went and went and went.
Yeah, so basically what happened, I found out after the fact, but twice I went into anaphylactic shock, and like I don't have allergies or food allergies, and it was happening. I hadn't eaten or anything. Once was in the middle of the night, once was after working like a long day on a Saturday. And basically what had happened was I had worked so many hours in a row and was running on no sleep and probably not proper nutrition, that I depleted all the adrenaline in my body.
Oh, wow.
So I had like a minor allergy, and adrenaline's like what fights that shit. So I didn't have enough adrenaline in my body to be fighting the allergy.
Yeah.
So essentially, I had like a full blown allergic reaction to something that I probably have a very minor allergy. And when I'm in with proper sleep and like proper nutrition, I don't even realize that I'm allergic to it. Um, so we never found out what it was, but essentially, it's like, yeah, it's just depleting all the adrenaline in my body from overworking myself.
Damn.
Um, which is crazy because like when you're doing that, it's almost like that's what gets you by, and like the adrenaline of working so much and keeping and going and pushing through it, and the end is in sight. But at the same time, that's literally killing you,
Yeah.
which is somewhat strange to figure out.
Did you have
I
a similar experience, Tyler?
I can relate. I mean, I yeah, I feel that I was never, it's not parallel, but adrenaline, overwork, lack of sleep, stress. I mean, I was having like gnarly heart palpitations. Like,
Mm.
was just kind of at that point, like, pulled off the side of the road one day. I was like, if this doesn't resolve, I'm probably just gonna, step outside of the truck and try to get a ride to the hospital because I shouldn't be driving there. But it's just overwork, underslept, and you you know I wasn't laughing for any other reason than I feel like I can relate to that mental place of, we're just gonna sit down and get shit done and self-sacrifice to um to take your body to that level. And laughing that, like, again, not laughing at you but chuckling because you can go 12, 14 hours without having a little nibble to eat, and that could be normal for weeks and weeks and turns into months and months, and your body becomes relatively conditioned to it, right? So that level
Mm.
of
Yeah.
normalcy is, it's not normal to most people, but you create a level of normalcy to yourself.
How long ago was that for you?
A little guy was probably like 12, maybe 1 year old. So 13 years ago was when I was really feeling that. And gone through it
Mm.
at other stages, but that was the worst of it early on. Yeah, I was
And what did you implement that was able to change that, or change what you were doing?
it was when I found out I was having a kid, I asked my buddy if I could live on his couch for a month while I get my stuff together to head to Alaska, and found out I was having a kid in that period of time. And I spent a year on his couch trying to get the business going. And I'd say that at that point in time, I said, if I ever go below $2,000 in my bank account, I'll just go get a regular job. And I had like $200 in my bank account. And that point in time that I was really stressing out. And I picked up a couple extra jobs, and the bank account was never less than a couple $100 from that point. And I just say straight up, it was just having money, financial means, that kind of carried me out of that stress at that stage of life. Yeah, just money.
So, and like, that's the strange juxtaposition that I feel a lot of us experience as tradesmen or craftsmen or women, where it's like, even every, like, your brand and what you're doing and the way that you're speaking, it's like you want to be doing this just for like the art's sake of it. Like, I want to create, and but at the same time, like, I know most of the reason why I worked so hard and I still work so hard and I do half the things I do is to not stress about money. It's not that I necessarily like money or I like the shit that I can buy with money. It's just I don't want to be worried about it. Like, I just want to know that we're okay and we're going to be okay, and I'm not going to stress about money. But like, I don't feel that I do so much of what I do because I like money, as much as just I don't want to feel stressed about it.
Yeah.
And it seems that you're in the same boat, and it's really conflicting for people like us who really want to be creating things and get so much fulfillment out of what we do, but in turn we have to find a way to monetize that continues to allow us to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I share the sentiment that money isn't what it is. It's to sustain a livelihood. And again, that's relative to every individual, but yeah, you have children as well.
Yeah, I have two. Nick has like 93.
I have 4.
Working on 94. Cool. Yeah, I
Working
mean,
on 90 more. Yeah.
those little munchkins, man, they changed, or at least mine changed me. I mean, it was just, how do I provide for you and give you opportunity? And I
Yeah.
mean, he's yes, I do love being creative. I love problem solving. I love the opportunity to work collaboratively with, design oriented people on projects where we can, find solutions. Like, seeking a solution, that process is really enjoyable and rewarding. Seeing the project finish, but like, at the end of the day, it's like, I do it for the kid. It's to give
Mm-hmm.
him opportunity in a future that, I kind of I don't know what the word would be, but I was always afraid that I'd die much earlier. And it was like, when I die, what do I leave to him? What does he have to start with? And I think that's been a really large push in my life to, give him something that I perceive as value. But he might look at it and be like,
Mm-hmm.
Dad, we could eat top ramen for forever, and I just want you around. Totally different set of
Yeah.
values based on the individual.
So what's your business and like operation set up now? Do you have people working for you with all that you're doing?
Yeah, I've had Drew Bear, 4 years. He's been with me. He worked with me a little bit before. He has his master's in architecture, and he's that dude is awesome. He is stellar as a human being and as a craftsman, and super intelligent. He's fun to work with. We like the same music, and we have a good similar sense of humor, and it makes it like, it doesn't feel like work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Will work weekends and long days, and it's very rewarding. I've got another guy that started not too long ago. Um, typically I always have about 2 guys in the shop with me. Finding office personnel has been the biggest struggle. Um, Absolutely, the largest struggle is to find somebody to crush the office for me, and that's the thing that I hate the most. I found
Yeah.
that I have ADHD, so I sit down at try to get something done. I'll go clean. I'll sweep a floor before I punch a keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel that you're able to, like, the Drew Bear, I think you said it
Yeah.
was his name. I'm
Mhm.
gonna call him Drew Bear.
Yep.
um he has his master's in architecture. Like, does your business afford him enough compensation to offset like the amount of education he's had and everything else?
Not at all, man. And I tell him,
No.
like, dude, I, I wish I could pay you more. And he's like, I wish you
Yeah.
could too. But
Yeah.
he realizes that deep down he says, this is my dream job. I get to create, and everything's different. We do beautiful, unique projects that it's not the same thing every day. There's always a new challenge to troubleshoot, and he gets to draft things up and be involved in different stages of the project that fulfill him. And that's back to what we started with is it it's not the money that is the motivator. It's that intrinsic reward to that dude's 30 minutes early almost every day. Like, we'd be stoked to have an employee that shows up 3 minutes early every day as opposed to
Yeah.
3 minutes late, and this dude's 30 minutes early. And I'm like, dude, you don't have to be here. He's like, yeah, I woke up, I had my breakfast, and I just might as well get to work, because that's who he is, and I love it. He's a great dude.
So where do you think the business, like, is it what you're doing? Is it the amount of hours that you're putting in, or is it the market that doesn't allow you to capture the amount of, like, realistically, you should be, in a perfect world, you'd be getting more money for what you're doing to be able to pay him what you feel is necessary for you to make the money that you're making. So where do you feel it's falling short? Is it market based? Is it that just what you do has too many hours going into it?
I would say some of it's market based. I mean, I there's it. So the business side of business is not my forte, right? I didn't go to
Yeah.
college and um, for too long, and that's not what I was studying when I was there. But I'd say part of it is also just myself. We'll have a great job. Everything's lined up. We pre-calculate everything, and things go wrong. My fault, their fault, somebody else's fault. Scheduling is a big deal. We set aside a schedule for, and it happens every year, and it comes back on me that I should have been more diligent in the contract side with the general contractor to say, hey, we're scheduled to give you 5 weeks from January 1st into the first week of February, and if you're not ready to go, then they're going to knock me for liquidated damages, but I'm not knocking them for liquidated damages. So we had
Yeah.
5 weeks, which we were waiting on this, and we passed up other job opportunities because we wanted to be ready and fulfill their obligations. And that's the management side of it that I feel that I dropped the ball on. And that happens. It happens every so often, but that's lost income. Market is one of them. When you get into the commercial side of projects, there's more money involved. It's, restaurants are great. They say we need to have this done by this date, and they're not going to sit there and nickel and dime you a couple $1,000s here and there for certain details. But on the residential side, things are different, and I'd say a combination. I don't know if that it's not fully answering your question, but I think it gives a little bit of insight.
No, but I think that it's like, it's so common, and it's something that I experienced as well for a long time. And I realized that, like, the less work I put into place and just found out who my more ideal customer was that I could sell at a better price point, and it was easier for me to understand my numbers, and I was actually putting less work in place. Like I was able to capture a lot of my design time,
Mm-hmm.
and I just focused on like selling to the right customer, and it changed my business a lot without really probably with doing less work. And I like when I was, not that my position was the same as you, but I was always like 1, 2 people with me, and I was always, I was keeping people busy, and so the job would fall through, like you said. So then I'd pick something else up, which long term wasn't really helping me
Yeah.
out. It was like just perpetuating the issue while I was able to pay somebody some sort of a salary, which probably wasn't what they even wanted in the first place.
Yep.
And I wasn't really tackling like the bigger issue, which was either like a combination of me having too high of an overhead, me not selling to the right customer, or just not being in the right market.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of spinning my wheels for years. And I just feel like with what you do, that there can't be that many people doing what you're doing the way that you're doing it in your area.
And I think we do have a few guys in town that, it's not, we're not Houston or Dallas or LA, but it's a little bit competitive. But I'd say, the custom work, it's a balance. In my opinion, it's a notable balance of being able to get those larger jobs that, carry you through. We like to be focused on a job for a good 6 weeks, as opposed to a project that's just going to take 1 week, because like to gear up and get your mind in the game. Um, those larger, longer, detailed projects are great, but I find I've got some friends that do metal work, like just solo railings and structural elements, but more decorative. And there's always a need for metal. I find that concrete in particular, you don't need a $10,000 concrete bathtub. You know, there's a it's a different luxury item, I'd say. And but I'd love to find a way to shift the business up in a way that would afford Drew more money.
Yeah.
Because I do look at his talents and, his resume, so to speak. We laugh about it. He and I, it's like, dude, you'd be making a shit ton more money elsewhere. He goes, I know, but I just wouldn't be happy, and
Yeah.
but
I mean, there's something to be said for that. It just like it gets to a point where you're like, damn, it's been 10 years, it's been 15 years. And like, what if you still get to enjoy yourself, but you're making twice as much as you did before? It's like, all right, well, this is even better. Like, I'm not that concerned with money, but I guarantee if he was making twice as much, he'd still be showing up a half hour early and still having just as much fun with it. And it affords you a little bit more freedom
totally.
in your life. And realistically, like I just feel like what we do and working with your hands and working the trades, and even if there's a couple other outfits in town, it's like how many people can do what you do, and it's an industry wide problem that people just aren't seeing that as more valuable. Like, yeah, you don't need a $10,000 tub, but there's people who want a $10,000 tub.
Yep.
And like there's those customers out there, and I think the more $10,000 tubs that you sell rather than like the projects that you said aren't really making you money, it's like focus on that shit, and then it does give you somewhat of an opportunity to make more money. But you get hung up in this cycle where it's like we just need the work and we take anything. And I've been there, and it really does create a lot of challenges for you. Sometimes it takes a lot of the fun out of it too, where it's like, can I just catch a break here? Like, I love what I'm doing, but I hate dealing with this shit.
I think it's also, I mean, there's also the side of, I think there's always a world where you take on like we've talked about this, you take on projects that aren't your ideal to make sure that you're generating enough revenue to support your guys and your family and your team's families, and then you're doing the idealistic projects. And as you say, Tyler, like the goal is to get to just doing idealistic projects. But in that same thought, and I had this earlier when you were talking about having kids and your priority being supporting them and making sure that you're fulfilling your duty as a provider. There's a part of me that, and Tyler and I talk about this a lot offline, is sometimes I get in this mindset of I just need to find a way to make as much money as I can, and that's it, and focus on that. And then once I do that, then I'll go back to being creative. And that's never like that's a thought. That's like my thought process for 30 minutes. Right.
Yeah.
And then the next 30 minutes, it's like I'm right back to the creative because that's what's drawing my attention. It's like I want to do that.
Yeah.
But it's like, but if I just focused on this for 6 months, I probably could get that on autopilot. And I think a lot of us have that opportunity, especially creators and people that can work with their hands, where it's like, I'm sure you could find a product that you could make on repeat, super cost effectively, find someone to market it and have that thing just spit out on autopilot and have it be completely like mind numbing, that would generate revenue where you could then go be a creative. But we collectively, we don't like, we struggle to be in that place. We struggle
Yeah.
to focus our effort there because it's just not what we want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because it's us doing it consistently for a long period of time, despite knowing what the payoff could be. And but back to the original point, it's like, but instead we do this thing where we do a bunch of creative stuff and then we go fill in with non-creative stuff just to make sure that we're sustaining, and we do it just long enough where it's like then we flip back to the creative. It's this, it's a difficult cycle, and I think it has a lot to do with the romanticism that we attribute to what we do, um, in this craft.
What do you find? I mean, that sounds like we can relate as individuals on that, and it's fundamentally our character. What would be, if you were to, your top two avenues to get that shift out of where you are to try to create an environment that you do have that call it mailbox money, right? To create something that comes back into you every week via the mailbox. Like, it's not a lack of your creativity, it's not a lack of your skills. What two things would you guys, I mean, you've spoken with hundreds and hundreds of people, like what are two things that come to mind that can really catapult that notion from where one is at in that situation?
I feel like one big thing is that you have to like let go of you have to let go of ego. Um, as far as like you got into this to create really cool stuff and like super high quality shit. And sometimes that stuff is just not the most profitable work.
Yeah.
And like you've established your reputation through doing that, but there's jobs that you can do that do make you money, and like maybe you have to concede a little bit of that artistic freedom, but every like much of my business and growing my business, not from like a production standpoint or a volume, but just the customers I wanted, was doing very specific, very high quality work. And you realize that like it's really hard to recoup the amount of hours that go into that crap. So it's like, where are other ways, or where are jobs that I can still express a portion of that, but there's another portion of that job that just makes me money.
Sure.
But I have to let go of a bunch of my ego in that, and I have to realize that I'm not going to be able to post all the coolest shit on Instagram. Like every one of my job isn't going to be like be able to be photographed and be able to document the entire thing. But what if, like, my customers are happy with it? What if I'm making money with it? What if I get to focus some of my creative on another aspect of that job? So I think sometimes it's just letting go of what you think you want so badly, and more so entertaining, like, serving somebody else's needs within your business.
Cool.
But I like, I think as an outsider, like for me, looking at what you do, it seems like the commercial based route would be easier money than commissioned work residential.
Yeah.
For I would assume that you know the reasons why, but like usually you're not dealing with the homeowner, a customer. The quality tolerances usually aren't quite as much, and typically it's just better paying work, uh, as far as like hourly or whatever component of your pricing is. So to me, it's like if I were in your position and wanted to just make more money, I feel as though I would look more towards the commercial realm, um, as far as serving their needs. But you'd have to find a way that granted you with the fulfillment that you still need in life.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Um,
think going back to something on your website, like you talking about the inconsistency of concrete. I'm sorry, I'm hung up on this, but I think that I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why there's a blog about that. But one of the hardest things, especially as Tyler, you were saying with customers and dealing with residential and like the tolerances and the expectations around, how quote unquote perfect something is, it's oftentimes completely unrealistic in the residential world. And and clients have this unreasonable expectation that things are going to be exactly the way that, not even that they saw or experienced, that they've developed in their mind.
yeah.
And concrete's a great example where we all do our very best to produce an outcome, and you're doing it blind, like completely blind. It's in a mold. You have no idea what that mold, is doing. If there was an air pocket, and you use your experience to obviously, prevent that, but then coloration and what it looks like. And when you grind it and you do expose the aggregate, does it look consistent? There's
Yeah.
all of these things that, you really have to be on the forefront of educating. And like I said, you have that spelled out. And we're talking a lot about concrete, but I think a lot about metal. And you were talking about metal earlier, and a good friend of mine, Rich Costa, here in Massachusetts, is a extremely talented metal worker. And he is, he's become very good and well versed at patina
Mm-hmm.
and the art of patinaing metal. And it's so interesting to hear and see how that process is done, and the stakes in which you're taking because of the rate of failure.
Yeah.
And like, it's everything. It's the humidity, it's the
Yep.
temperature, it's how fast you apply it, it's how fast you
Yep.
wipe it off. And I
Yep.
know why you're chuckling, I know. And but then it's like, but then you finish it, and you can look at it and be like, man, this looks beautiful. But the client's like, I really wanted it to be more brass looking,
Yeah. Yep.
or I wanted it. It's like, but yeah, but that's just not a thing.
Yeah.
This isn't paint.
Yep.
This is,
Yep.
metal and you know, patina. I was going to call it oil, but I don't think that would be the correct terminology. Chemical, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that's where, again, we're talking about art. And I think Tyler's right. In the commercial world, in the little commercial experience I have, the tolerances are very different, but they do it's almost as though they do appreciate um the inconsistencies behind materials
Yeah.
more, because I think that there's more product knowledge going into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, residential, I feel it's be tough. I also think that like so many people just expect us to, and I think that a lot of it's self-inflicted, but like we market ourselves as these artists, and that's why we get into this. But then our entire industry is commoditized, and it's like, oh yeah, let's get into that.
Mm,
Like, yeah, at least I get to make what I get to make, but meanwhile, I'm working 12 hours a day and making less than I'd make if I worked at the convenience store. And we keep convincing ourselves that like, yeah, we're creating something to pass on to our kids, and uh this is what it takes to be a craftsman, and this is blood and this sweat and these tears, and the cost of everything continues to go up, but then we just like don't value what we do enough to be like, you know what this is going to be, and yeah, you don't have to hire me, and yeah, you can go to one of these other 3 shops in town, but at the end of the day you're not going to get what we offer.
yeah,
Which is like I feel like especially when you get into the art world, um I look at other industries to set like a metric or precedence for that, where it's like what you do is truly different than everyone else. If what you do is truly different than everyone else, then the only way to access what you're able to offer is to play by your rules and pay your price. And I think that like once you create that product or that system where it's like, yeah, there's 3 other games in town, but nobody else can do what we do,
yeah,
then it's like you almost can call the shots. And I look at it, from like a music perspective where if my kids want to go see Taylor Swift, there's no way that I'm going to offer them like Olivia Rodrigo tickets when they want to see Taylor Swift. Even if I'm like, they're 50% less, they don't care. Like they just want what they want. And I think that like if we're creating art, we have to have that same vantage point. We can't just say that like our art is the same as somebody else's art. If that's the stance that you're taking for
yeah.
your business.
I like that.
I that being said, I think that it is really hard when you're putting that much time and effort into a product and into a business to be able to recoup all of that. Even when you're doing the custom one-off stuff,
Yeah,
we've had multiple people on the podcast that create custom products, custom cars, and it's like, yeah, we don't make that much money on the custom cars. Yeah, we charge people $1 million to make a car, but then when you figure out how much money we spent to create this one-off car, it's like we're making pennies. We're actually making more money on the production models of our cars
Mhm.
that are far less money. And it's like, yeah, so the more expensive one-offs feed my ego, and then the
Yeah.
consumer-based product actually pays our bills.
yep. And that's relative to what you were saying is kill the ego for a minute and realize that you have other opportunity there for financial means and gains, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, figure out what makes you money. And I think that like you have, with how small your business is, and that's not a stab, your business is larger than mine, um 2 to 3 times as big as mine. um you have like it's so transparent, and like to be able to break down and dissect your business and what makes you money, it's not that hard. Like it's pretty easy to see, and you probably have a pretty good gut reaction to what that is. But it's even like creating opportunity for Drew, where it's like, hey, these are the jobs that make us money. You want to run with that? Here's your percentage of whatever we get in that. And like it frees you up. You get to still do the stuff that you want. It gives him an opportunity to kind of eat whatever he shoots and
Yep.
kills, and provide. Because like realistically, that's one of the reasons why I don't really want full-time employees now. It's because I don't really want the stress of creating a business that keeps them busy all the time, because I know that that doesn't really serve me as a person and it puts a lot of stress on my shoulders.
Mhm.
But if I could create a business where it's like, hey, if you want to work underneath this umbrella, you can work as much as you want, make as much money as you want, as long as it's not creating more work for me, I'm almost fine with that.
Yeah.
Because I get to do what I get to do. My liability and my exposure and my risk is covered, and now I'm still providing for other people. But it's really hard to find those type of people.
Yeah.
I find
What do
it.
you, Tyler? What do you find in terms of? I think earlier you said most of your business is word of mouth and referrals, but what do you have a lot of opposition and from potential clients, and is that price driven? Like what is the reason why someone doesn't work with you? Or I think you also said there was a lot of competition in your space. Is that right?
There's just other concrete shops in proximity based on the population that we have that's, hiring that stuff out. Um, we missed out on a job with somebody here. They decided to go with the company out of New York instead of us because the architect was from New York and they'd worked with this company before, and they just said, "Hey, we feel more comfortable with this," even though I worked with the GC, years ago. And um, a lot of the jobs, we just did a really high end job. We're big corporate project, and um, it wasn't back to the commercial stuff. This is what we want. They know what they want, um, and seldom is there complaints about the price, which means maybe I need to up the pricing, I guess. If
Yeah.
I don't know,
Well,
but
I think it's twofold on commercial, and I think you hit on it in your first sentence is that they know what they want, right? So they're going into it with an expectation where a lot of residential clients you know, they're just not informed. They're not informed as to what this stuff costs, and they see something they see something on Pinterest, like I want that, and then they get a price it's like, oh, I didn't realize it was $10,000. I can buy a bathtub at Home Depot for 240.
yep,
It's like, sure. And I know that they do the same thing, but one's handmade concrete and the other one is cast iron. It's like we're talking about different things. Where commercial, they have the sense of what this costs. It's usually, and when there is a pushback on price, it's not, hey, how do you do this cheaper? It's
Yeah.
typically, hey, is there something that you see in here that we can simplify and still get the same quote unquote outcome and just do it less expensively?
the value
That's
engineering.
usually the conversation. It's like, yeah, just can you value engineer this so I still get the aesthetic, but maybe cut the concrete down by 50% by filling it with foam or
Yep,
whatever. Who knows?
sure. Yeah, those projects are also. We get a lot from architects and designers specifying our product, and that the level of trust that the client has to their particular architect, their particular designer, even the general contractor. It's like, hey, we are deferring to your expertise, and we trust you for the decisions that you're making. Where it makes the process so much more enjoyable. Yeah, the residential can
Yeah.
be tricky in that, but again, the right residential clients are also utilizing designers that, it is mostly word of mouth. So a lot of the folks that we've worked with over and over again, and, try to maintain positive rapport, across the board. And then you can have that level of trust to value engineer. You don't, you know, if somebody doesn't quite know you or know the process, then it's just about trust. You might think that you're taking advantage of
It's
them in one way or another, and that's not the case.
and do you feel that like a lot of leads you're having to sell what you do to customers, or they're coming to you already and saying, "Hey, we know what you do"?
Yeah, I can roll into a lunch and learn meeting looking long haired and, come in with, I'll put nice clothes on, of course, right, on the sales side of things, but for the most part, I can speak very freely. I'm not clean shaven. I've got the long hair, and people can see the quality of the work in which we provide and see past what I look like. Where 12, 13 years ago, I couldn't give a box of cookies in a back rub to get jobs, like it was right after, it's 2000,
Sign me up.
2010, but the economy is bad. But yeah, I feel very, very privileged that I feel that our work speaks for itself, and it's a really great place to be. Like, it took a lot of time to get there and create those relationships, and um, yeah, to push those big projects.
Yeah, I think so. Like a big thing for what you're doing also is getting to the point where you're not having to sell every single job. Like the jobs are selling themselves, where you start getting the customer base that's coming to you and already understands how you work. And that's the whole word of mouth, the architect designer driven, where like you being a small business, probably hands on a lot, if you're not capturing all of those selling hours and they're not somehow being paid for in the overhead of you running a business, it's the same thing as you working for free.
Yeah.
And like getting, however you're building your brand, however you're marketing yourself, to do it in a way that you're not having to reiterate who you are and what you do and sell your services. Where like, I don't know, 10 years ago, I would spend how many hours on every single lead convincing them that I was their guy,
Yeah.
and then them not hiring me anyway, where it's like, damn, I want to get to a spot where people are coming to me, they already understand what I do, they know who I am, and being like, hey, what's the process like for getting on your schedule? And then it's like, now I get to sell what I want at the price that I want,
Yeah.
and I get to drive this entire conversation rather than worrying about who else are they getting a hold of,
Yep.
who else are they bidding a project against. I need to sharpen my pencil, sharpen my pencil. You know what? I can concede that half a day there because I'm already running back and forth to them a bunch of times, so I can just pick up that same material when I'm doing it. And I feel like you're like, nope, these are the hours that go into this job. This is what it costs. And if you don't want to do it, then I'm going to go to this customer over here that always feeds me work that I know that they're willing to pay that cost.
Yeah.
And like for me, that it wasn't even as much time as me just having the confidence to get there, to be like, I'm going to say no. Like I'm going to leave myself open. To wait for the job that comes along that already fits all the check marks
Yep.
than trying to adapt my business to
Yep.
fit this job for somebody else that doesn't really fit my program.
Yeah. Lost opportunity if you're focusing on
And
that stuff.
exactly, but like that's just our industry, because it's like I'd rather work like an idiot for nothing on jobs that cost me money than say no to a project and like focus on something that actually works for me.
Yeah.
You think if you're in the shop, you think if you have people on the job, you're making money, but it's not until you actually look at things that you're like, that job literally cost me money.
Yep.
That like the shit that's in your house, I actually
I
paid
paid
for.
for. Yeah.
And it gets to a point.
It's
Yeah.
a terrible feeling, isn't it?
Yeah. So are there projects for you that you don't make money on that go according to plan? Meaning, like, I understand there's jobs that are going to be screwed up, that you have fixes on that, like, yeah, that didn't make us the money. But if a job goes according to plan for you, are there jobs that you feel you don't really make that much money on?
I There have been, of course, underbid, or that's on my shoulders, but I stay away from countertops the most that I can. Um, the expectations of performance from clients, the expectations of aesthetic. If you have a bench that has a little blemish in it, and I say blemish, I mean, we could do so when we. This is a great relative notion that if we do a concrete color that requires a little red or a little yellow, and the red doesn't blend in all the way, we pre-blend everything, we blend it, as we're making it, and we blend it again. And so you're trying to get a homogeneous mixture. But let's say there's one little speckle in this countertop of a red pigment that didn't fully homogenize into the mix. Somebody can look at that and say, oh my goodness, it's ruined. It's wrong. But if you had black granite with a little red little, dollop in black granite, they'll charge you triple for it because it's so rare.
Yeah.
And so countertops are one of those things that people, they're so intimately involved with it, visually being a horizontal surface. And we'll do sinks all day long, but the expectations there are a little bit different, where you can integrate the sink into the countertop. Gives a whole different feel. But counters themselves, man, I don't like doing them. Expectations, and I end up, and I think this is something that I do on my own, is for example, I'd called a client the other week. I said, hey man, I'm really sorry, but I'm not happy with the way this laid down. I'm gonna buff it off and reapply. Like, it's gonna take a little bit more time, but I just don't feel good about the quality of the product. I'm sorry it delays your installation, but I hope you understand. And he goes, yeah, I bet I'd be okay with it without. I probably wouldn't even recognize what you're talking about, but I'm not happy with it. And that's what he acknowledged. He said, look, I respect you for doing what you want. And countertops have a different level of expectation, in my opinion.
I don't know how much money I've cost myself over the years where something was definitely good enough, and I just like,
yep,
I molded over so long, and then I talk to like 3 or 4 other people who all tell me to leave it, and then I wind up going home. I stay up all night. I go to sleep convincing myself I'm gonna leave it, and then I wake up in the morning and I'm like, fuck it, I'm ripping that shit out. And then I'm
And
like,
literally no one
I could have
ever,
just
like,
left it. Like, I could have just left it.
and it's
Yep.
so frustrating because it's like you do it thinking that someone, just like maybe one other person's gonna be like, yeah, that was worth it. And no one,
Yeah, or the customer's like, you know what, I really just wanted to get in.
yeah,
And you're like, I just ripped that all
Yep.
out, and you really didn't even give a shit.
like at all.
I mean,
You're concerned with just moving back in.
Yep. I admire and I respect your diligence of fulfilling yourself and your own expectations. I also understand how, it oftentimes it's just good enough. Nobody else is going to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're so intimately involved with your process. Whether it's, watching the wall that's out trying to chase an unplumbed wall with the door, whether, I mean, it's anything, but you're so closely involved with it that you are going to become your own worst critic, and it doesn't do good for the soul. I think at the end of it, I mean, there's got to come a point where I speak for myself, where I just got to say, hey, it's good, and it's better than it. You've surpassed the expectation. Let it go. Move on.
The really sad part about that is, like, what you're creating is one off. Like, it's handmade. The entire like foundation of being expensive and being handmade is the notion that it's going to be imperfect.
Yeah.
Like, if you want perfect, you don't get something that's handmade.
Yep.
So like, we're creating shit that's handmade, trying to make it perfect, which is like, the fact that that's the illusion that people want. It's like, well, listen, if you want something that's perfect, don't get concrete.
Yeah.
So it's almost like re-scripting that, where you want a handmade cabinet, you want a handmade railing, you want a handmade countertop, whatever it is, like, you should, like, that's what makes it beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, that's what makes art. It's the fact that it's not mass produced, it's not printed, it's one off. It could never be the same thing again. The colors are mixed
Yep.
once. Like, that's what makes it art. And then we'll go and tear shit out because it's now not perfect enough for our standards, when that's exactly how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. I mean, and which comes back to us as individuals, right? Like, we've had a few clients from time to time be like, I don't like this. It's like, well, okay, you didn't listen to the conversation, but for the most part, it's any of those struggles that you're talking about comes from ourselves within, right?
Yeah. I've also found that like so much of the time I look back on my career and like money that I made earlier and jobs that I did earlier and how quickly I could get them done. And as I progressed and as I refined and honed my craft, those same projects, like if it were a bathroom, took so much longer because I was just so much more honed in on the details and the execution, and I got considerably slower. And every now and then I take the job now where it's like, hey, we just need this done. And I'm like, well, that's not what I do anymore. And then I'll go and do that project and I bang it out so fast and it makes me so much money. And I'm like, well, that was actually kind of fun
Yeah.
because like I wasn't working in this environment that was perfectly pristine and everything was 110%. And it's like, damn, good enough is good enough. And like we had this guy on the podcast a couple times. His name's Spencer Lewis, and he's a trim carpenter. And he once said to me, like years ago, when I was trying to build my business and do this like perfect work, where he's like, yeah, in my world, good enough is good enough. And I was absolutely appalled that he said that. And it wasn't until years later that I understood what he was saying. And it was like, yeah, you have to draw if you want if you want to be a profitable and lucrative business, you have to properly define and set the level of expectation, and then you have to manage the amount of time and money that goes into that project. And oftentimes I don't feel that we are necessarily underbidding a project from like the rate perspective, right? I want to charge X amount of hour per this. We are not managing how much time we're putting into it, and we're over delivering on these projects. So like the concrete countertop where you're budgeting 40 hours for it and you're putting 60 into it, it's not that your rate's wrong, it's that you're putting too much time
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
And like that's all on you because the customer, if you set the expectation that this is what a 40-hour project looks like and you're going to have this and this imperfection
Mm-hmm.
and this is what's going to look like versus a 60-hour or 80-hour job, like, and you're losing money on it, realistically you fucked up because
Mm.
you over delivered on that project.
There's a great visual about that, and you see it on social media quite a bit where they do the drawings. It's like this is what I can draw in 2 minutes, and this is what I can draw in 2 hours, and it's like the same thing, but you see the 2 hour and you see the amount of detail that goes into the drawing, and it's like that's that's the value in time. You want something more elevated to a higher expectation. It's it does take more time. And I mean, you're spot on, Tyler. Like the fact that it's not that the rate is wrong, it's that you're spending too much time for what you ultimately promised.
Yeah, we're always like, we have to charge more. Like we have to charge more for our employees. I need to raise my rate or I need to raise my overhead and profit. And it's like, no, you need to estimate your hours correct. And then you need to manage your hours correctly
Mm.
because whatever you estimated is where you need to draw the line on that project. So if you've already dumped 75% of the hours in and you're not coming up to being complete, you need to figure out why and have the conversation with the customer about why is this over? How do you want to proceed with this? Or
Mm.
you better get boogieing and get out of that job and still contractually execute what you were supposed to do.
That's a
Yeah.
great piece of advice. Yeah, I think estimating is one thing, but managing your hours is almost more important.
It is like that's where you make your money.
Hmm.
Like you sell the job at whatever the job is. But then if you're not tracking and managing how much time you thought you were going to spend on that project, that's where you're going to make your money.
Yeah.
It's on the back end of things because if you thought it was 100 hours and you spend 150, like that's on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Easier said than done, but I think that if you are able to at least account for that in some way, and yeah, we're going to give some time away here or there, you're not going to be like, oh, well, I left this entire thing out of the scope. But I think that on the back end, that's where a lot of us screw up.
Have
I
you
think
changed?
most relatable is definitely the mill. Sorry, bud.
Oh, go ahead.
We got to. No, we got a delay. You go.
I was just asking if you guys, have you shifted up your business to be, when you're talking about tracking hours, like have you become hyper diligent about the the paperwork side of that element, or are you still just kind of running? Because you said it's you, Tyler, you're just running you right now, correct?
Yeah, so I am definitely diligent about that, and like that's why I say the biggest difference. I always did the work up front, whether I had employees or not, whether I was lump sum, time and material. I always did the work up front, and then I always just thought I underbid these projects, and I realized that like the rate I landed the job because everything fit. The price was right, the scope was right, the schedule was right. All I made all of that work, but then on the back end, I didn't ever track and account for how long things were taking, what type of work I was doing that wasn't within the initial scope. So that's where I was losing all my money.
Mm-hmm.
I was putting 1.5 times the amount of work into it. And whether it was because of unforeseens, it was because of things that I missed, I didn't account for. I was never tracking the day to day and then going back real time. Like it's not enough to look at a job when you finish a job that took you 5 weeks. You look at it 5 weeks after the fact, you're fucked. Like you already lost all the money, right? You need to look at it 1 week into it and say, where did I expect to be at 1 week? Where am I? So then you can adjust for week two.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can have a conversation with the customer at week two. Hey, this is what we're running into. And then you do it for week two, week three, bigger projects, bigger contractors, break it into 2 week intervals. But like that's how I started keeping the pulse on my jobs and really managing budget, where I'm not only creating everything up front and projecting what it's going to be. And then I'm not looking at it once the job's over and saying, well, this is what everything costs and this is what I made, because that doesn't tell me shit. I'm looking at it every couple of weeks to say, this is where I planned it being on day 10 of work, and this is where I am, and why am I there? And now, how do we move forward? And involving the customer in that conversation, or being like, you know what? We just ran into shit that took me longer and I didn't account for it. Like, we need to make that time up somewhere that's still going to contractually execute what we said we're going to do, but how can we become more efficient
Mm-hmm.
to get back on track? So yeah, like that's really, really important for me. And when I started doing that, I basically approached every job as if it were time and material. And even if I were lump sum, I would do the same thing, because then you're managing your budget and you're actually saying, we don't have any more budget to spend on painting this. That has to be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to walk away from it at this point. Like, we can't make that finish perfect anymore because we're already over on hours.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you're going to make money, regardless of how big or small you are.
And as a creative mind, does that drive you bonkers to be so diligent on the paper? Or have you found a happy place to be able to sit down and crush through that?
So I currently, with doing that, I get paid what I need to get paid, and I'm guaranteeing that I'm making my money. So it's a trade-off. Like, I am in such a better place mentally because of the finances being in order,
Mm-hmm.
that it allows me to focus on the jobs that I want to be doing.
Okay.
So like, yeah, there's more paperwork, but at the same time, I feel as though like I'm financially being responsible for myself and for my customers and for the budget. And then the jobs are way more enjoyable. Like, it's way more a job that you're making money on and guaranteeing that you're making money. I don't care how creative or lack of creativity it's going to be. Like, it's a much better job when you're not working 15-hour days because you don't have any money on budget and you still have to pay your subs at the end of the job.
Word.
Yeah, I mean it's similar on our side too, where I would say that we're diligent in terms of tracking our hours, but hearing this conversation and talking about this out loud, I realized that it, we struggle exactly with the fact that we're constantly over investing into our projects constantly. I've went as far to promote that, especially early in my career, is like, this is how you grow, this is how we've grown. And there's truth to that. There's a lot of truth to the fact that I'm where I am in my career and our business is where it is in our life because of the over investment into the product, because we've constantly looked to compete with ourselves and level up and do better and better projects. And but you're exactly right, Tyler. Like, there's a threshold where, and going back to what Spencer said, at some point good enough has to be good enough, or you're just never going to be profitable.
Correct.
And for a lot of years and a lot of different, situations, like, it's just been this kind of revolving break even scenario of just, hey, this works, but you're spending all of your money on quote unquote marketing by investing it into the next piece and or the next project, so you can then level up. And I think this goes back to the beginning of our conversation of, you're just constantly competing with yourself. And when do you stop doing that and just take a deep breath and do what you want to do? And but balance that with the fact that, like, but someone's going to give you X amount of hours or X amount of dollars to do it. And you remember that you have 4 kids at home and I have 15 guys that have families, and they all need to make the money in order to support that. Yeah.
And I'm also like very fair with my hours, because the way that I've changed things now, like there's not many days that I'm on the job that I'm actually like hanging my tool belt up at 8 hours. Probably work 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours. But I understand within that 10 hours, there's a bunch of efficiencies that like I think I'm capturing in other parts of my business. Well, I know I'm capturing other parts of my business. So when I'm doing that and I'm looking at what my hours are for the job, I realize that there's parts of my job that I make a mistake because it's the first time I'm doing something, and I think that that's probably a cost that should be attributed to that customer. But then there's times where I just screw something up because I wasn't paying attention, because I had other things going on. So like when I'm really capturing all those hours, like if I work 9 hours in a day versus 8, I'm capturing the 8 hours because I feel that my customers are very fair with me with affording me the budget that I am and operating the way that I do and hiring me in the first place. And realistically, I worked for so long that I didn't capture 8 hours of my time each day. It was like maybe 4 this day, maybe 8 this day, maybe not any time for the last 6 weeks of a project. So now I'm like, if I get 8 hours a day, even if I'm on the job 10 hours, I've made my day rate and I'm good with that. I'm not going to try and like capture all these additional nickel and dime hours when I feel like life's a two-way street
Yeah.
and business is a two-way street, and I've already captured my day rate. So I feel that I'm pretty fair when I look at it from that perspective. But I think that I know we have a bit of a delay, but I think that would help you also, Tyler, like moving forward in business, just understanding like I I think that if you look at like what you want to make in a year and how much everything costs you for your business, and you start looking at like break it down to a weekly, monthly, hourly cost, add in the time for all the back end and the managerial expenses, which like I basically do with just creating inefficiencies in my work to like, for example, if I'm going to spend on average a day of week doing paperwork for a project, I can't necessarily, when I go to budget for a job, charge somebody for that or have that conversation. So I just adjust my hourly rate that I'm only going to be productive for 32 hours a week.
Gotcha.
So, like, instead of having that
Mm.
conversation, I account for that inefficiency in there. And that's just the way I operate. It's a little different if you have a different business structure, but then that affords me, hey, if I'm meeting with the customer for an hour, I need to go meet with the architect. Like, as long as my belt's on for 32 hours a week, I've already made my money. I'm good. I've made 5 days worth
Yeah.
of wages. But I think that if you look at your numbers as far as what it takes you to operate on a daily or hourly basis for everyone involved in your business, you're probably going to be like, holy shit, it would cost this much to deliver this wall assembly. And it's going to be probably more than you're charging right now. And you're going to be like, well, I can't get that. So then it's trying to figure out, like, where's the happy medium where you can either get to that number or at least be halfway in between there and move up. And a lot of that's just going to end up at that point, like adjusting your market or adjusting who you're selling to, and realizing that, like, dude, for you to operate as a business and to do what you're doing, it's expensive and it costs a lot of money. And most people aren't willing to pay for that because there's 10 other people down the street that aren't accounting for any of that shit and doing it for way less. But, like, I don't want to be one of those 10 guys.
Yeah.
I'd rather work less and make more money. And I think that once you understand all of that and you start tracking your expenses and your hours and everything else, that it'll really change the trajectory of your business. And probably I think that you'll be able to at least get compensated a little bit more fairly for the art that you're putting out at, like, this commodities price point,
Yeah.
because you're competing with everyone else who probably isn't looking at it from the same perspective as you are,
Sure.
Right.
or has 10 guys who they're paying like a lot less money
Yeah.
to do it, which is fine if that's the business model you want, but, like, that's not your model. So you have to make sure that your model is creating a great income for you and a future for you and your son and everything else that's important to you. What you think, Nick?
I like that he's deep in thought.
He's like, what the hell did I
Yeah.
sign up for?
He's like, I thought this was
I'm changing my name.
No,
Tyler.
go ahead.
But no, I was gonna say. I mean, I really appreciate these type of conversations and your commitment to it. I think that, to bring it back to the beginning of the conversation, you kind of dance around the idea of, I took a quote unquote real job, which, in some sense, I think everyone understands what you meant by that, a job that will allow you to support your welcoming son, but the commitment to do it in a way that is artistic and supportive in nature, and not, and be self-aware enough to step away from things that were influencing you to do anything other than that, i.e. social media. That takes a particular personality, and I think that, for better or for worse, I commend you on it, because ultimately that's what all of us want to be doing. We want to be doing what we love to do, and we're constantly faced with the competitive nature to survive or compete or make more money or do bigger things or have a bigger revenue. And and none of that really matters if number one, you hate what you do, but number two, if just because you're making more, collecting more money doesn't necessarily mean you're making more money. And
Yeah.
I think that oftentimes we just focus on the wrong output.
The timing of this is pretty cool. I appreciate the reflection. Drew is he told me a while ago that he's leaving wherever his sweetheart had to do her leave for her postdoctorate, and he said, wherever she goes, I go. And I says, well, Utah's probably not on that list, and so he leaves in a couple months. So I think mid-July, and so I've been reevaluating. I don't know if you guys, what your cadence is, but I find I come out of winter. I go into winter ready to slumber, and I come out of winter ready to rip and dip. But I always kind of ask myself, what the hell am I doing with my life and my work? And um, yeah, you guys
That's
said a couple things that have caught my
completely
attention.
normal.
I hope so. It definitely.
I would say I can't even. I couldn't even put a number to how many times I slip in and out of that thought. I think we all do. I think there's I mean, it's at least every month. So for you to do it, winter and spring, hey, good on you. I'm like once a month thinking like, what the hell am I doing? And and usually it's shut it down, disconnect, close my eyes, go to sleep, wake up, reset, do it again. But that's I
Yeah.
think that's the part that is the most fun. It's not supposed to be easy, right? It's supposed like what we're doing, and things that are worth it are hard, and this is hard, and it's hard for so many reasons. And when you do see the quote unquote other side of it, you often can reflect and feel a sense of accomplishment. And I think that is what we're constantly striving for, is that feeling that we did it.
Yeah, and I think I want to make sure that this conversation, like, I'm making a ton of assumptions about you and your business, and they're basically based on the conversations that I've had with dozens of other people that I would say are in the same position as myself and probably a similar position to you. So I hope that I didn't put any words in your mouth or like hypotheticals as far as what your business looks like.
No.
I feel that your story is pretty common in the industry, and I can 100% relate to it and do the same thing, have done the same thing. And there's things that have helped me and things that have hindered me. But I don't think you're in a position that's that different from many other people. I think that at the end of the day, we need to have a better understanding of our worth and what we do, and realize that not everyone can do this, and that there's people out there that really truly will appreciate what we do, and focusing your effort and your energy on that, and obviously on yourself, are going to create the best type of lifestyle and business for yourself. And I think that that's like a step in the right direction.
Yeah. You got me thinking.
We appreciate your time getting on. I know that you had no idea what you were getting into.
Yeah, my office gal lined it up, and then she quit, and I figured out how to use a computer. I'm glad that worked out. But no, I
Is
appreciate
this your first podcast?
Uh-huh.
Hell yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
like I
I mean,
said,
it's only fitting.
I've got friends that have listened to your stuff for years, and they have nothing but wonderful things to say. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on.
Well, Tyler, we appreciate you being on and sharing a little bit about your story and what you're up to.
Yeah.
So if you want people to hire you or come talk to you or find out what the heck you're doing or come work for you,
Yeah.
where are they going to find you?
It's moderncraftsman.com. And
Not to be confused with
with you.
moderncraftsman.co.
You got, maybe I'll sell you the website if you need. No.
That's your out.
I think you probably have a DM on Instagram from years ago offering to buy your handle. So that offer probably would have to be increased at this point. Tyler, really, really good to chat with you, man. Honestly, I appreciate your perspective on things, and I think you're wildly talented, and I think that anyone that does want to check out what you do with concrete and metal, definitely head over to moderncraftsman.com. Your entire portfolio is on there, and it's impressive.
Or the Instagrams. I don't maintain it and update it, but every now and again somebody does. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for your time. And
Anyone that pretends that they don't do social media calls it the Instagrams. So
I appreciate you guys.
Tyler,
I thank you.
That's crazy that his office girl set this up and literally quit on him, and he had no idea what he was getting into. So that's pretty amazing. But
Good for him, though. We've
hell
had
yeah.
many people cancel. And
Or come on, that's never done a podcast that shouldn't do a podcast.
Yeah, and it's funny because we our co-host was having our guest co-host was having technical difficulties and the guests got up and running but not the co-host. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah, so
Man.
Jeff Sweener was supposed to guest host with us today, but come to find out we didn't do a test run with his new equipment and that failed. So I texted him. I'm like, hey, don't stress. We'll do a test run later. But
Day in the life of Modern Craftsman podcast.
moderncraftsman.co.
Yeah.
.com.
It's true.
Guys, thanks to our
I didn't realize that like his name when I tried to look up his name based off our calendar alert, and I was like, I don't know who this is, and it came up with this HVAC guy who owns this like HVAC distribution type of company, and I was like, I guess this is who we're talking to.
What?
And then and then I texted Nick and was like, hey, any info on the guest? And he's like, no, just that he's the Modern Craftsman. And then once I like typed this in, I found that out and obviously was cracking up laughing, but I had no idea that like his name was that he was the Modern Craftsman until you said that. And I was like starting to do my research on this random HVAC like distributor company with who has like the same first and last name.
Tyler.
Whoops.
There you go. Well, guys, hey, real quick, we are launching something pretty exciting. Head over to modern-craftsman.teachable.com. We got a couple digital downloads over there. But Tyler and I are working on putting together a bunch of courses. We've had hundreds of conversations on this podcast, and we've improved our own businesses using the podcast. And now we're going to take what we've learned and package it up and give it away to you guys on the Teachable website. So head over at modern-craftsman.teachable.com. It is new. It is just for the listeners right now. We have not done any promotion. It is a work in progress, but hey, if there's something of value on there, we want to make sure that you're able to get it today.
Hell yeah.
And of course, thanks to our sponsors, Andersen Windows and Buildertrend.